Behind the Shades.
Everybody, my name is Edmund Lee. You probably know me from the last podcast interview that we had together. The website is Ed is Pain Free. So all of you can find me on that website there, edispainfree.com, or also on my Facebook as well. You can find me. I have a group now. You can find me by that. It's called Pain Free and Peak Performance for Entrepreneurs and Coaches. And so the URL for that is Ed is Pain Free. And so what I do is I help coaches and entrepreneurs live pain-free and also achieve peak performance in their mind, in their body, and also in their state. And so that's just a really quick, brief overview of what I do exactly, Taryn.
Perfect. So let's catch up. The first time we spoke, you were going through a few things which led you to your path today. So remind us, how did you get started in all of this coaching towards performance, and tell us a little bit about your journey to that point?
Yeah, definitely. And so I'm now a coach. Right now, I'm coaching people to live pain-free and achieve peak performance. But before that, what led me on this path was it was actually an experience in my previous business, in the dry cleaning business. And so that business, I had gotten to that business back in 2014 at the age of 30. And at that point in time, I was in what I had considered perfect health, pain-free. I can move around. Mind was pretty clear, not really anxious, just pretty chill, relaxed. And so a couple of years into that business, I noticed that I started to have some pain in my body, a little bit anxious, it's like not really enjoying my work too much. And I was trying to figure out what was going on, right? I had some minor aches and pains in my neck and my back, in different parts of my body. And so at that point in time, I was doing the best that I could to address it in a more natural way. So, I was doing things where I was watching my diet, right? I was eating a lot of, getting a lot of nutrients into my body, green smoothies, things like that. But also at the same time, I was seeing chiropractics and massage therapists and different other more natural healing modalities to see if it could address it. And so what was happening was all that stuff, it was working, but it wasn't necessarily working. It was almost like I was taking 2 steps forward and 3 steps back, right? And so what happened was over time, it just got to the point where my pain started to get worse and worse and worse, to the point where, I was having a lot of difficulty getting out of bed in the morning. And it got to the point where I literally had to like roll out of bed onto my knees and just like push myself up to a standing position. And then from there, my alarm clock was set on the other side of the room. And so literally, I did this on purpose so that I would actually have to wake up in the morning. And so alarms blaring on the side of the room. I'm getting up, barely, like pushing myself out of bed. And literally I'd walk from one side of the room to the other side of the room, almost like I was stuck in a 70-year-old body, like baby steps. And at that point in time, I knew that, oh crap, like this is a problem. And if I don't change something, my future is going to be really, really bleak. And to me, I mean, I was in my early to mid 30s at that point in time, and it was a very confusing point in my life because here I am, I could barely move. I was having trouble. It was taking a few minutes just to get out of bed, and I could barely move from one side of the room to the other side of the room. And this is just one example. I was having difficulty literally even being able to, at work at the cleaners, just being able to bend down and pick up clothes and throw it into like a little bag or into baskets. Once I was like kneeled down and like down on my knees, right, I couldn't even get up. It's like literally I had to like use all my brute strength just to like pull myself up. And so that was just on the physical level, right? But like at least on the mental and the emotional level, it was at that point where things were, I was just always anxious. It's like things were like really like they were like going like 1,000 miles per hour, literally. It's like you got calm, right? Well, calm is like one state, but then like I was on the opposite spectrum where it's just like dude, it's like things were coming like from every single direction, almost like I couldn't process all that stuff all at once. And and I was trying to figure out what the heck was going on. And so at that point in time, I could not figure it out because everything that I was already doing traditionally, chiropractic, massage, diet, and acupuncture, it wasn't doing anything. And it wasn't until I started to address some of the emotional aspects, to address some of the emotional healing, right? In terms of why I was why I felt the way I felt, right? Because I was in a dry cleaning business, right? That was pretty much, I was there from morning to night, right? It was also a really busy hustle bustle environment because we had multiple locations. And then it was almost like it was a toxic environment in a sense with the relationships, but also the environment. And so I started to make the connection, maybe not necessarily at the beginning, but later on, a couple years in, that that was causing some of the pain. Some of the pain. I didn't necessarily make the connection at the time that there was a connection that was what was causing the physical pain. But once I started to address the healing on the internal, the emotional pain, that's when I started to see a lot of the things that I was doing already, like my diet, chiropractic, massage, acupuncture, and some of the other like more natural modalities. I saw that stuff starting to work better until the point where my health, my physical pain started to go down. It started to decrease. And as that started to happen, my physical body started to feel better. My mind started to feel more calm, more relaxed. It didn't really matter as much what was going on in my business anymore or what was happening in the environment. I was more calm and relaxed. And here I was in a business where I no longer loved it, right? But shortly after, somehow it just the stars aligned and we were able to sell the business. And I was able to get out of that business and really move into what I'm doing now, which is helping people to be able to live pain-free and achieve peak performance. And so when we had done the interview about 2 years ago, you had caught me more at the beginning stages, when I was about maybe like 5 months out, but like 5, 6 months out of my dry cleaning business. And so it's really been a journey since that time that we last spoke. And right now, in terms of really that growth and development in terms of what it is I'm doing.
That reminds me of a time where I felt like my health was changing because I was taking on different stresses at that time. And I'll give you an example. I was in a situation where I was dating someone and it was keeping me up at night, right? It was putting stress on me, and it was a different type of stress that I wasn't used to because of stress in every day, right? Like, I'm going to wake up. How am I going to perform? I'm going to be able to help people, as you mentioned, right? Can I make people get better? There's different stresses in life. Some will push you to be better, some will make you feel worse. And one thing that I wanted to do was I had to figure out how am I going to be able to handle this because it's new and it had an impact. There's times where I would be sitting at home, Edmund, and I would start to feel like my temperature elevate because it was always on my mind, right? And then what I did was I had to realize, similar to you, I'd identify, hey, my life was a certain way up until this point. Something was introduced and is causing this reaction. I had to kind of like reverse engineer it and figure out. But as I look back, I'm happy I did so because I can more easily and more quickly identify things that will potentially cause me stress. So for you, Edmund, when you're looking back, did you realize or did you understand that you would be this far after going through what you went through, Edmund?
So as I look back on it, honestly, no. I mean, like even from 2 years ago, right, when we last talked, or even when I was in the midst of all that pain, no, it's like heck no. I didn't imagine that I'd be where I'm at today. It was just one of those things where even when I was in the dry cleaning business, the only thing I was focused on was, hey, it's like what's right in front of me, right? And what do I got to do in this very moment to get to that next, like, what do I got to do right now just to get to that next step forward? That was all that was on my mind at that point in time. And same thing when we spoke about 2 years ago. The only thing I knew was, hey, I'm pain free, and here I am. I'm on this journey, and I'm helping others to be able to live pain free as well. And I mean, I always had a vision in terms of, okay, this is, it's like there's something calling me, there's something pulling me to be able to support other people in their healing process. But where it would take me, I didn't really know, but I'm a firm believer in that, it's like, I just, for me, the inner world's a big thing. It's like my outer world is a huge reflection of my inner world. And so I just know at some deeper level, as I continue to focus on what's inside, that whatever comes to me on this journey, whatever presents itself on this path, hey, it's going to be perfect. And as long as I'm feeling good, I'm happy, and I'm aligned, you know what? It's gonna be one heck of a journey.
The clients that you're currently assisting, do you see a little bit of yourself in them as you're helping them?
Yeah, I'd say yes. That's I think that's the funny thing that I've noticed along the way is that there's it's almost like the right people come to me in a sense in that um what is it? It's almost like, at least for me, right? It's like it's almost like the people I work with, it's like it allow when I'm working with them, I see a lot of similarities. You know, whether in terms of like some of their internal struggles with like maybe procrastination or like self-sabotage or self-limitation, you know, or just not being very confident in themselves or their ability to move forward. It's like these people, right? It's like I'm blessed to be able to work with these people, not because like I'm all high and mighty, but it's just like, you know, I've been where they've been. You know, I might not be like up here and they're like here, but you know, I'm at least like a few steps forward, you know, a few steps ahead of them or even one step ahead, right? And that's all it really takes in order to be able to facilitate change in a person. And so I love working with people, and it's really one of those things where by working with people, it's almost like a mirror. It allows me to be able to see aspects of myself that maybe sometimes there's like some blinders on that's a little bit harder to see if I'm just trying to like analyze it or look at it myself, you know? So it's almost like by working with other people, I'm able to see certain things about myself that may need additional healing or deeper healing.
So when you mention you see your a little bit of yourself in them, and that allows you to self-reflect, Edmund, what's some of the things that you see that are similar, like in regards to maybe behavior or your thought process? What's some things that are similar between yourself and your clients?
I think at the end of the day, one of the main things is a desire. The people I work with, the clients I work with, they're all coaches, they're entrepreneurs, right? They're here to make a difference in this world. So they're very heart centered, and they're here to make an impact. And a lot of times, so a lot of times what's happening is there's something within them is almost like a internal block that's holding them back from being able to step forward in their life and to be able to almost in a sense take that action. So yes, I deal with people and helping people and entrepreneurs get out of pain, right? And it's almost like that's the beginning part of it, right? Because if a person's dealing with physical pain and there's limitation on that, it's much more harder to be able to step into that next phase of their life where they're achieving peak performance, where they're actually making an impact in this world and delivering what their message is. And so really that's the first stage, is really getting them, building that firm foundation within them so that they have that foundation where their physical body is like strong and solid so that they feel the best that they can, right? So because once the physical body feels good and the mind feels good and solid, right? There's that solid foundation to be able to move forward in life. And so that's really the first phase. But after that, in terms of the similarities, it's really the emotional blocks, the things that are holding them back from being able to take action in their business or even take action in their personal life, right? And so that's one of the things that we address in the coaching programs when I'm working with people. So I work with people on a 3-month basis in a 3-month coaching program, but also a 1-year coaching program. And so really the main difference between that, right, is like the 3-month coaching program, that's more to get the goal of that one is to help them to achieve peak performance, to help them achieve peak performance in their body and then also in their mind. And then in terms of the 12-month program, that's really where it kind of like that quantum leap happens in their life. It's to create that quantum leap in their life so that they can, in a sense, make a quantum leap in their personal life, but also in their business life so that they can, in a sense, reset their money blueprint, right? From like here to being up here, right? And then once they're able to do that, then it's like, okay, they're starting to remove a lot of those limiting beliefs, those subconscious blocks. And then they're essentially changing their money blueprint from like here to here so that they're wired for success, they're wired for abundance, prosperity, joy. And then that's really where the magic happens in terms of being able to get their message out competently without anything really holding them back.
You mentioned helping them build the foundation, and then you mentioned sometimes there's emotional blocks. Do you see when you're dealing with like the entrepreneurs or those who are very business minded and business oriented? Because these are probably some of the most determined and some of the most ambitious people, but you're working with them to get them to that point. Are there any commonalities in some of the clients that you deal with that maybe prevents them from getting to the next level until they meet with you, for example?
Yeah. So what it is commonalities. I mentioned this in the last interview. And so this is I'm really big on this. The inner world is a reflection of the outer world. And in the last podcast interview, we had talked about something called the chart of consciousness or the scale of consciousness. It's mentioned by David Hawkins in his various books, Power versus Force or Letting Go. And so essentially there's like different levels of consciousness or emotions, right? Emotional states. So it kind of goes on a scale of like 1 to 1,000. And so on the lower levels, you have things such as like anger and, anger, resentment, and emotions just feel very, very heavy. And then on the higher levels, you have things like joy and peace and enlightenment. And so when it comes to that, can you remind me really quickly, refresh me really quickly what the question is so that I can just make sure I give you the right,
Yeah.
give you what your
So
listeners are
the,
looking
the
for.
question is, so when you're working with entrepreneurs who are very focused in a lot of ways, right? And because you're going through this, so to start your own business, to be your own boss, to be the master of your ship, you're very focused and very business oriented. But sometimes we're going to need assistance, like what you're doing with those who are making them feel good and you're coaching them. And you mentioned you help them build the foundation
You bet.
to feel better, as well as you assist them with any emotional blocks that they may have. Do you find any commonalities between your clients in regards to what may be preventing them from achieving the next level of success that they want before they come to you?
And so to answer your question, yes. And so going back to that chart, the commonality is a lot of them, they're not aware of this scale of consciousness or this chart of consciousness, right? Because they're not aware of it, it's not within their consciousness, or it's not within their awareness, right? Then they don't realize that, hey, there's a difference between somebody who's sitting on this according to the scale of consciousness, right? Somebody who's sitting down here versus somebody who might be sitting up here, in terms of maybe how they're feeling emotionally. And maybe that connection in terms of how the emotional is linked to the physical, right? But also how that emotional is linked to some of the results that they're actually achieving in their life, in their personal life, when it comes to maybe their relationships with their family or their friends or spouses or anything like that. And then on the business side, how that scale, right, where they are, impacts their level of success that they're having in their business, right? But also maybe how they're actually feeling about that business as well on the inside. And so it's one of those things where once they start to shift that relationship, right? So once they start to get light, right? Because if they're too heavy, right? They got too many emotions that are weighing them down, that's almost like they're gonna have to wait, right? They got too much. So if they have too much weight, they're gonna have to wait before they can actually raise up to the higher levels and experience a lot of those emotions that are more joy and abundance, right? Whether in terms of how they're feeling about their life or their business, but also in terms of the results that are coming in. And so really that's one of the things that I see the commonalities that the people that I work with are experiencing, is that just that level of awareness. And once they have that level of awareness, then that's really where a lot of the magic starts to happen, because then we're able to figure out, okay, hey, in terms of being able to get you from point A to point B in your business, to be able to achieve more, maybe achieve more abundance, right? Or to be able to get more clients in, or to bring in more monthly sales, right? It's one of those things where, hey, what's separating you from here, right, to getting up here? A lot of times it's what's happening in the inner world. And once they can transform what's happening in that inner world, then it's like, boom, it's almost like they're a rocket ship and they can get up there, but it's just really making that connection. And once they can, it's like the sky's the limit for them.
So define for us the in the inner world, the outer world, and the connection between the two for those who don't know.
Okay, so the inner world, outer world, let's see. For those who don't know. So I would say that's just from my experience, what I've seen. Because in my own journey, right, when I got out of the cleaners, that change happened the moment I started to heal my emotions. because at that point in time, my perception of the world was, hey, my situation sucks. It's like crap, it's a pain in the ass to like wake up every morning and like be here morning to night. It's just like so much work. It's just a dread, right? And so because of that, what was happening was that was my inner world, right? And because of that, I was almost like what was happening in my outer world and the circumstances was like matching up with that. And so along that journey, as I start to shift, right, as I start to heal and change that perception of my circumstances from, okay, this is like a pain in the ass, like these, it's like I really hate what I do. It's like, oh man, it's just dread, and like these people are like, oh, all right. So as I start to shift that to like, okay, you know what, this is a learning experience, and it's like it's okay. I might not necessarily enjoy this process, but I can still make a difference regardless of what situation I'm in. And even if it's in the case of the dry cleaner, even if it's as simple as, hey, I'm in this dry cleaning business and I'm helping somebody with their clothes or to clean somebody's clothes or something like that, I can make an impact just from that simple action, because it's not what you're doing, it's how you do it, right? It's how you show up in that moment. And so that was an example of kind of where when I started to do that, I started to see that shift, not only within, but also on the outside as well, in terms of what was coming, like what was happening. So that was the first example. The second example was, in my business, when we spoke 2 years ago, right? Man, you might not realize it. I was a little bit terrified to be on that podcast with you. And so I know it might not have shown, maybe it did, maybe it didn't, but I know that that's one of the challenges that a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of coaches have when it comes to growing their online business or growing their business in general, is just being in front of a camera, being able to communicate their message. And so at that point in time, it's like I was still pretty fresh out of the cleaners. I was in that phase where I was maybe like 6 months out of the business, and I didn't know that I'd be helping people to achieve peak performance as well. I just knew, hey, it'll be pain-free, right? And so that was what I was focused on. But at that point in time when we last spoke, it's like, yeah, I was pain-free, but it's like crap. It's like there's that next phase where it's like I got to get that message out, because as an entrepreneur, you got to be able to communicate your message, but you got to be able to communicate it with confidence, but also a level of calmness, right? Because you got to be talking with people on video or like different podcast interviews, or even or even communicating your message on social media. And so I find that that's a thing that holds a lot of entrepreneurs back in terms of really feeling worthy that they have something something to share, or that they are actually an expert in their field. And so that's something where I had to do a lot of inner work, a lot of inner healing in terms of being just feeling worthy of being online, worthy that I had something important to say, worthy that I could actually help people or facilitate that process of healing. And so that's what I focused on a lot after our last podcast interview. And so that's what I mean by the inner world. And then as I did that, right, it's almost like the blocks or the things that were like unconsciously holding me back from bringing in more abundance or bringing more success. It started to melt away to the point where there wasn't any resistance anymore. Because a lot of my clients, they mentioned, hey, Edmund, there's something, it's like, I want to take action in my business, but it just feels like there's something that's like holding me back. There's some invisible shackles that are like around my neck, around my body, that are just like chaining me down. And it's like, I can't figure out what it is. And so that's part of the work that we do. It's like, that's part of the inner work as we start to uncover what the root cause of some of those invisible shackles, those chains that are holding them down. Once we do that, it's like those are removed, right? And it's like, as those are removed, they can just focus on the implementation, the action. Because there's a lot of coaches out there that teach, hey, you just take these actions, right? You take all these different actions, and because of that, you're going to have success in your business. But that's not always the case, because it's not always about the actions. It's about what's going on in the inner world. And as you address the inner world stuff, as you start to remove those invisible shackles and chains, it's almost like the actions, yeah, they're important, but they don't matter as much, because it's like you take the actions, but it's almost like things start to happen, and they start to happen where they deliver results. And so that's what I've seen a lot in my life between these last 2 years. It's like, man, some of this stuff is amazing. And even with the stuff with the people that I've worked with as well, it's like, as we start to remove those chains, it's like magic starts to happen. and it's amazing to see.
I know for me, I had to have a conversation within myself to truly understand where I was going. And that's why I asked you the question about the inner work and the inner world, because I knew where I always wanted to be, but I wasn't the man that I needed to be to get there, if that makes sense. So I had to develop within. And as you mentioned, you had to do the work, you had to get your emotions in line. You had to understand yourself. You had to conquer certain fears. But let me tell you, Edmund, it may it may have been scary for you back then, but it was definitely scary for me when we first spoke, just because it was new. I had to figure it out myself. And I always prided myself on knowing enough about a topic to hold the conversation. I don't need to master the conversation or one up the person, but I want to be able to come across as, hey, he actually knows what he's talking about. So when I did the work and understood the type of person that I wanted to be, that's when I was able to present a better terrain. And as I presented a better terrain, I was able to help people in different ways and more efficient ways. Because talking to people is pretty easy when someone has an issue. Like if someone has broken up with someone, at the very least, you just give them the shoulder to cry on. Sometimes you don't even have to say anything, right? But there's other times where you're like, hey, have you thought about doing this? Have you thought about that? You go from a passive support system to now you're a proactive one. You're giving them recommendations. Have you looked at yourself this way? Have you thought about this? Have you identified this? Have you come up with a solution for this? Do you do that in your work as well, where you would identify something about one of your clients and say, hey, have you thought about this solution? Have you thought about this way of thinking with your clients?
Yeah, for sure. With my clients, I approach it from different angles. Um, 'Cause I'm a big believer that there has to be some sort of like conscious connection or it's almost like if a person is not necessarily conscious of what is holding them back from being able to achieve this type of result, it makes the work much more slower. And so by asking questions like that, right, it really is able to bring to get that person thinking in terms of being like, oh, okay, it's like I hadn't considered this part, or I hadn't considered this thing in terms of, oh, maybe that's what's happening in my life. And so yeah, I do that in my business in terms of when I'm working with clients, to be able to bring that into their conscious, right? But then that's just really one small aspect, because that's the conscious side. But then within that, there's also the things that are buried within the subconscious. And sometimes people they're not always aware of what some of those blocks are. And so that's really part of some of the part of the deeper work that I do in terms of being able to really get them into that place where they're able to access some of those things that are stored in the unconscious, or even to be able to release some of the stress that's stored in their body. And so, one of the ways I do that is through breath work. So I have like somatic breath work that I lead people through. And it's a cool way. It's a cool method, because in the breathwork sessions, we're able to get them into these states where they're able to let go of that stress that's been stored in the body. And so it's a trip, because like people can just through the way of expressing, right? Because a lot of people they suppress these emotions, right? And so when they suppress it, right, it starts to cause a lot of issues. And so really we get them to the state during the breath work where they're able to express it, whether it's through screaming, yelling, crying, or like laughing, different forms of expression. And so by doing that, they're able to really kind of tune into maybe what they weren't necessarily aware of in the past, and to be able to let go and start to heal. And so that's really what we do in the breathwork sessions, is so that they can tap into those parts that they're not really aware of. And then once they're able to let go of that stuff, then they can start to bring in, more of the good stuff, the things that they actually want in life.
I believe that's key, that the letting go and not suppressing what you're going through. It takes maturity, it takes courage, because there's some times where there could be something that's so ugly, something that is so scary, that we're like, you know what, I'm going to bury that deep, deep in my closet. But eventually you're going to have to come face to face with it. Is that a difficult choice? for some of the clients that you deal with to come face to face with some of their more, I don't want to say dangerous, but maybe more of their less attractive behaviors, or maybe their thoughts or traits?
Yeah, for sure. Because, healing requires bravery, it requires a lot of bravery, and not everybody's ready for that. And it's not for the faint of heart, it's not for the wussies. And so if a person's not ready for it, I don't, my approach is, I don't push. A person's going to move at the rate that they're ready to move. And the people who find me, those are the people who are ready to make that quantum leap in their life, who are able to make that shift from point A to point B. And so, it's like one of the things that I say a lot because I hold these 5-day challenges. And so during these 5-day challenges, I help coaches and entrepreneurs to be able to achieve peak performance, right? In mind, body, and state. And so one of the things that I always say is, 50% of the healing, it occurs the moment a person actually shows up, right? So the moment a person, whether they show up to my 5-day challenge, right? Or whether they show up to one of my breathwork sessions, right? Or something like that. The moment they do that, that's already 50% of the healing, because healing requires bravery, it requires courage. So the moment a person is able to do that, it's almost like they're at least open. They're at least open to the possibilities of like, hey, there's something going on within me, or there's some change that, I got to make a change within my mind or in terms of my mentality about how I'm viewing the situation. And so the moment they're able to do that, they're at least open. And then, so that's where 50% of the healing happens. And then the remaining 50% of the healing actually happens during the session or during the event. And then afterwards as well, where there's actual processing and the integration and stuff like that. And so to give you an example, I had a breathwork session. What are we in right now? Like June. I had a breathwork session back in April, right? Like 25 people who attended, right? And so at the point in time, right? It's like I was promoting this on Facebook, like that I had a breathwork session, right? And it was one of those things where, can you believe my mom actually reached out, like she left a message, right, and said, hey, I'm interested in experiencing your breathwork. And for me, I was just like, crap. It's like I don't know if I'm ready for this, because at least because for me, I'm the youngest in my family. I have 3 older sisters, and so I'm kind of used to that role growing up, where I'm more of like the baby in the family. So I was always a little bit more reserved in terms of speaking my truth, or really speaking out in terms of what it is that I do, just more freely, right? And so when my mom was like, hey, it's like, Edmund, it's like, I want to try it out. I was like, I didn't know what to say for like a good day or two. I was just like, oh my goodness, like, what do I say to her? Do I let her in, right? Or like, do I let her experience it? It's like, what's she gonna think, right? Hold on, that's going through my head. It's like, what is she gonna think? It's like, oh my, am I gonna get nervous, or am I gonna be okay? So this is all like part of the inner game, the inner world, that was like all the stuff that was messing with me at that time, that other coaches and entrepreneurs, they might be experiencing too along that journey. And so that was all the stuff that was going on, like all the whispers and all like the like that it's like the shivers. And so as I kind of sat back and I was like reflecting a bit, I was just like, it's going back to it's like the fact that my mom reached out like that, it means that she's open. She's open to healing, or she's open to exploring, something about herself. And so if 50% of the healing is just showing up, then who am I to say, no, mom, you can't join my breathwork session? It's like, who am I to say that? She's willing to take that first step to move forward. And so 50% of the process, 50% of the healing is just showing up, then okay, then heck yeah. I'll put aside my pride, I'll put aside my fear, my ego, all that stuff, and I'll just say, go ahead, join, it's okay. And so she participated in my breath work. There was 25 other people, and it was a beautiful experience, because at the end, like, she got to experience what my work was, because she had no idea what the heck I was doing. And it's like, if you're a parent and you're looking at your child or your kid, you're like, are they doing something? Are they doing good work? Are they doing bad work? Is it legal or not? They might not be able to wrap their head, right? And so from that experience, from being in that 90-minute session with me, she was able to see, oh wow, the work that Edmund's doing, it's like, it's profound. And then what made it even more powerful was at the end of the session, there was each one by one, each person was sharing their experience or how that breathwork session was changing them. So for some people, like pain, like physical pain that they had been dealing ever since like childhood, it was gone, right? As a result of that breathwork session. Or for other people, they had a lot more mental clarity in terms of what the next steps were in their business that they had to take to get them from point A to point B. And so as these people were sharing one by one by one by one, my mom was like seeing this. And so it was like, it was not only healing for her, but and healing for everybody else who was sharing, right? But it was healing for me because it was allowing me to see that like, oh wow, it's like the stuff I am doing, it's making a difference, right? And it's like, and it was really hitting home to me because my mom was there. I was like, oh, it was a special moment because she got to experience my work. And then afterwards, when I hopped on a call with her just to talk privately, she was like, hey, Edmund, it's like, good job, good job. And it's like, yeah, I felt something afterwards and cool. And so that was like the other 50% of the healing, for her. And so, yeah, that was just really a special moment. Yeah, it's right.
So, Edmund, as we close today, what's final words would you want to leave with the next generation who's looking to make sure that everything is A-OK and that they're continuing to improve their peak performance?
Yeah. And so the message is, do the work. The inner world is a reflection of your outer world. And so, like we were saying earlier, healing requires bravery. And so just know that as you continue to heal what's happening in the inner world, right? Then almost as if by magic, right? If you heard my story and what happened, shifts will begin to happen in terms of your perception, not only of how you feel about yourself, your level of confidence or your level of self-worth or your level of peace and joy, but as you start to do that, it's almost like the outer world will start to reflect as well. Will start to shift, and you'll find that your relationships with your family, your relationships with your business partners, associates, and anybody that you come across will start to improve. And it's almost like as if by magic, like the actions that you start to take in your life or your business, it'll start to lead you to where, to where you really want to go. So life will become much easier, as you focus on the inner world, as you start to change what's within.